Welcome to Black People Love Paramore, a podcast where I explore the common and uncommon interests of Black people in order to help us feel seen. Please rate us and write us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. 5 stars only because we are 5-star bitches. We're Yo Gotti. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe, and all of those things. I'm your host, Sequoia, and today joining me to chat about friendship, you might have seen her on your TikTok For You page, female friendship coach and educator, Danielle Bayard Jackson. Okay, Danielle, thank you so much for coming. Your book, Fighting for Our Friendship, is coming out soon. Without revealing too much, can you tell the folks a little bit about what we can expect?
Yeah, so you know what? We've got to get our friendships together. It's that simple. But if you are a person on the internet, then you see all the content that is encouraging us to opt out at every turn. And while there are some times when, okay, this relationship's expired and it would be unhealthy for me to stay, how are we equipped to stay, to work through challenges, things like that? And so the idea of the book is to help us understand from an aerial view the mechanics of women's friendships. Why do we do what we do? And then to also provide us with tangible strategies to create more satisfaction in our friendships with one another.
I love that. I find myself seeking out books on friendship. I've read Frientimacy, which I
Oh,
enjoyed a lot.
mm-hmm.
I plan on reading Platonic. I see that you have recommended that book. I was stalking
So
your
many
TikTok per
times. Yeah.
usual. Yeah, and I'm like, I'm definitely gonna have to check that one out because you're like, you recommend this one for everyone who you chat with about friendship stuff.
So good. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that because I always say that I hope that my book is one of many books people have on their friendship bookshelf, because whenever we
Hmm.
think about relationships in other contexts, our work relationships, romantic relationships, you already know you're probably going to listen to several podcasts on the subject. You're going to get several books. So the same thing with friendship. So I'm hoping where our book is maybe offering a little more texture to the conversation is it's very woman specific. We cooperate a certain way. We have conflict a certain way. So I'm hoping that it adds that aspect to the conversation, but I hope that people are stockpiling tons of resources to help them get their friendships together.
I can't wait to get my hands on the book. I'm so excited. By the time this episode comes out, the book will be out. This comes out May 2nd.
May 7th.
Don't play. Go pre-order it now. The link will be down in the show notes. You know where to find it. So make sure you do that. I have already pre-ordered. So
Oh, yay.
yeah,
Thank
make sure
you.
you do the same. But yes, of course. I'm very excited. Can't wait. You mentioned sometimes we need to figure out when it's time to leave a relationship, but often that's not necessarily the case. When is it time to leave a friendship? Is there a time where you're like, you know what?
Yeah. I like to anchor this conversation with this. There's research that finds that we replace half of our friends every 7 years. So to some degree, you have to almost expect there's going to be a natural pruning process in the friendship garden, right? But sometimes I hesitate to say that because you have some people who are very avoidant and conflict averse who feel very justified by that. So they'll be like, exactly. So it's time to cut people off. And so it's like I'm talking to different audiences here because there are those of us who stay, we endure mistreatment, we endure feeling dissatisfied because we feel like we ought to, because we feel like that's what women do because we're loyal. So you stay, and then we have those of us who are ready to opt out at any point of tension. I'm annoyed that she disappointed me. So we have to be realistic and honest with ourselves about, okay, what's going on here. So a couple signs that it might be time, just general signs, one could be if the reason you're staying is because of your shared history. So some people will justify staying because they're like, I mean, we've been friends 20 years. So, I mean, which appeals to something called I think it's like sunk cost fallacy. Like I've already put so much in this, I might as well keep it going. I don't know that that's totally a valid reason, but it's something to consider. Another might be you don't like who you are when you're with your friends. You become a different person. You're complaining more than you normally do. You're engaging in toxic behavior. You're whatever it is. You don't like who you are. That might, be a sign that this relationship's not healthy. And then finally, and this feels very, very like very simple, but if when you look at the whole view of things, the bad outweighs the good because there's always going to be bad. Annoying habits, your friends let you down, that will happen. But if when you look at things from an aerial view, the bad things that are going on outweigh the value that it offers to your life. it might be time to sunset that relationship.
That makes a lot of sense. And I want to go back to that stat that you said in the beginning about every 7 years, you kind of prune your friendship. As someone who is anxious and an anxiously attached girly, as many of us are, that stresses me out. Like that stat always is like, no, 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 not my friends, please. I don't want them to go because there's just like that fear of abandonment that sits with me. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to be the one to end it. So they're going to leave me. That always leaves me wondering when it is time to leave a relationship, a friendship relationship, does there need to be a conversation? Does there need to be a formal breakup from
So
the friendship?
that's a great question. Here's my thought on that, right? A lot of friendships dissolve through a fade out. I think more than we give credit for. A lot of friendships, like you guys are tight, and then you would both initiate a little less. You both get kind of busy. You both kind of acknowledge that things are shifting and kind of let it go. It happens a lot. In my opinion, a conversation is necessary when there's a mismatch in our objectives and expectations. So as soon as one person's feeling like, I think I want out, and the other person's expecting that we're going to maintain the status quo, something needs to happen so that nobody feels misled, so that you don't feel perpetually dissatisfied, annoyed, you're dreading her text. Like once we get to that point, you're becoming dishonest because you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be out of town next weekend. So sorry. And girl, you're not going out of town. Stop lying. So at
Yeah.
some point, like, is it deeply uncomfortable though? Yes. Is there a chance that she's going to be mad at you or share a false narrative with other people? 100%. Is there a chance that she misunderstands what you're saying? Yes. Also, the right thing to do would be to tell her, hey, I have been giving a lot of thought to our friendship, and I think it's important that I be in spaces where I just feel a little more free to be myself. And I know that feels cringy, but when I'm having that conversation, I'm not going to highlight the ways in which you are inadequate. Girl, you're too much sometimes, or you're too negative.
Mm.
That might be true, right? But I don't want to leave her with the complex. I want to be as tender as possible. So I'm going to highlight instead what I'm moving toward. I think I need to be in spaces where I feel more comfortable. I think I don't have the time that I did before to maintain this friendship. I think I need to be in a space where XYZ. What am I prioritizing? And can I communicate this is why I can't maintain this friendship in the same way? And the last thing I want to do is hurt you. But I think it's really important that I be honest. And you'll also notice I'm using a lot of feelings words because I know it's popular now to use that HR language, right? Like, I just don't have the capacity right now with my boundaries, girl. And
Yes.
I've been tempted to do that too because it feels safe to reach for that language. But the last thing I'll just say
Yeah.
is I want you to be careful of that because the reason it feels cold and disrespectful is because if I was holding your hair in the back in the bathroom 20 years ago, I can't suddenly be talking to you like HR. It's just incongruent with the history that we've built and it can feel disrespectful.
Yeah, it feels like dehumanizing almost. Like it's like, oh, yeah, you're talking to me like a robot. Like I'm not a human being. That feelings words portion is so important. I'm so glad you brought that up. That makes so much sense. Also, speaking of incongruencies and expectations, what is it about a girl's trip that ends so many friendships?
Honestly, I'm almost scared to go anymore now. Like, Jesus.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going.
It's like, I love you, so I don't want to travel with you. Like, you don't get
I don't want to
it.
risk it.
Oh
I love
God.
you too
Yeah,
much.
it's rough out here. I know that's like a running joke, like, do not go to Miami with your friends. You're not gonna be
Yeah.
friends, when you come back.
Yeah.
I think the reason that's such a running joke is for a lot of reasons. One is because we often don't talk about expectations because it feels very unsexy. It feels like it's gonna detract from the chemistry we're supposed to have. And we just assume that you're my friend, we have fun when we're together. What is there to talk about? I don't want to kill the vibe. But I think that's exactly what sets us up. If in my head I'm thinking it's going to be a nice blend of group stuff and individual stuff, and then we get there and everybody wants to just do group stuff all the time, and I didn't get time to recharge, I'm getting tense, right? I'm getting anxious. Okay. Or
Mm.
if we're inviting, the more the merrier. Some people have that attitude toward group trips. Yeah, invite her too. I don't know how. I don't know how I feel about that, because the company involved directly impacts the experience of how vulnerable I feel like I can be, of how comfortable I am doing certain things. If people are drinking or doing certain excursions, there's a certain level of trust required. I don't know you like that. So who am I inviting? Are we inviting two girls who kind of have a history of having some stuff back and forth? Because if y'all can't get along for a 2 hour brunch, what do we think is happening in Mexico for 4 days? You know
Yo.
what I'm saying? Like, let's just be honest, you
Yeah.
know? And so I think it's just like a lack of talking about our expectations. I think the assumption that we all define fun in the same way, and you don't, which sounds so technical, but you really don't. Maybe I'm thinking we're going to kind of like chill and be low key, by the pool, but you're trying to squeeze in every excursion from sunup to sunset. But then again, I don't want to be difficult on the trip. So maybe I'm venting about you to my boyfriend on the phone or venting about you to another girl. So it's just so many things, but the conditions are different than they are in quote unquote real life. And I think when we go on these trips and we have money issues and she didn't pay me back, but I'm not going to say anything, but I'm going to grow resentful over the next 3 days. There's just so much because we just assume everybody's there for the right reasons. We define fun in the same way. And unfortunately, sometimes it strains the friendships because of that.
This is so helpful for me right now. So I'm planning my 30th birthday trip.
Oh, yay.
I'm just going to Washington D.C. I'm not doing anything like
Yeah.
wild with some of my friends. We're staying in an Airbnb. A lot of them don't know each other, and so I'm trying to be very intentional about who's going to be interacting with each other the most, who's going to be like sleeping in the same room, because again, there's only 5 rooms and there's 10 of us going. So I'm like,
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Okay.
some folks are going to have to sleep together in the Airbnb. So I'm listening very closely to everything you're saying right now. I have already put together the itinerary. I'm one of those people, so I'm like, here's the expectation, y'all. We have this going on, and on the last day we have a free day. Please do what you want, stay away from everybody or go out, party, whatever you want to do. Okay, but these first 2 days, one of them is my birthday, so we'll be doing stuff on that day, and the other one is the weekend day, so we gotta do the weekend stuff on that day.
It
That's
sounds
it.
like you're hitting a home run. You got it. You set the
Thank you.
expectations. People know what the house situation is. So I think the more you can front load the conversation with, here's the expectation. Hey, it's my birthday. On that day, I expect, which sounds so obvious, but you would be surprised. So to say, hey, on this day, this is what I want. And if you know that you have people who are like, oh, I'm so eager to celebrate you, because I think with birthdays and bridal parties, some of the tension is because you have personalities there who do not know how to be in the background because it's my girl's day. So
Oh,
even that causes tension because you
wow.
have friends who are like, well, this is my time too. This is my trip too. This is my day
Oh
too,
my
girl.
god,
But
no.
I'm sure you have a great crew who's eager to celebrate you. You've told them how you want to spend the trip. I think the free day at the end is perfect so that they know, hey, if there's some little things I want to do, she's, made time for that. So it's gonna be amazing. It's gonna be amazing.
Oh my goodness, thank you. That really does make me feel a lot better. Oh my gosh, but what you said about bridal parties really rings true with me. My friends have not yet started getting married yet, right? So I'm not that deep into the experience. I've had a couple friends get married, but even from those couple that I've experienced, I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna have a bridal party. This just something's amiss, something's afoot. I can already see. It feels like you're putting your friendships, you're ranking them out loud like a MySpace top 8 or
Exactly that.
something.
Exactly that. And I think more people are going toward what you just said of seeing that and saying, you know what? This wedding can look like however I want. I don't want a bridal party. And I'm going to find other ways to show my friend you matter to me and you're special. And maybe I'll recognize you in other ways, but I'm not going to do all that. So I heard one person, I recently interviewed a woman who's a bridesmaid for hire, which is a whole other thing. But
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
it's a thing. It's a thing. Okay. And she was telling me she predicts that bridal parties are going to kind of fade out, but these bachelorette parties are getting bigger. Like people are really going out for that, but they don't expect much from the bridal party. And all I'll say to that is I think a reason why there's so much tension and women are often dismissed as like, oh, they get so petty around that day. But I think there's research to support why that happens. And it's because we really value mutual prioritization, meaning if you are my number
Yeah.
one, I like
Yeah.
feeling like I'm your number one. Maybe I won't say it,
Yeah.
but I kind of expect, girl, if you're my bestie, yeah, I'm your bestie. Like there's no
Yeah.
conversation. So when it comes to selecting bridal parties, we expect that how we rank each other is going to be reflected in the selection process. Well, the research finds, and this was, I'll admit, a very small study, but they found that 50% of our friendships are reciprocal. Meaning, if I rank you as my number one, you're my number one. We have like a mutual ranking, right? But there might be somebody in my life who I rank as like my number 5, but she sees me as like her number 2 girl, because of the way that her social network's been constructed over the course of her life. I fall as her number 2, but she kind of falls as my number 5. I've got sisters, I've got high school besties. That's just how it shakes out. So a lot of us assume that we have mutually prioritized one another. So when it comes time for the bridal party selection, if I'm not made your maid of honor, or if I don't make the cut at all, I'm not being petty, but you've got me rethinking our whole friendship. Wow, she's not as invested as I thought. Wow, we're not as close as I thought. And you have a lot of women thinking, I don't even know if I want to stay friends after this. So I see how on the surface it can look petty, but it can be very disruptive to the friendship.
Brutal and confirmed. Won't be doing a bridal party because who has time for those types of political dynamics going on when I'm trying to get married? It's already a stressful time. This is way too much. I can't do that. That's out.
Yeah.
Also, there's the infamous birthday dinner, birthday brunch. Aside from a trip to Miami, that seems like the second best thing that will cause your relationship to split up. And also something that the internet is very divided on. Folks are like, I've seen folks be like, you know what? Maybe I'm the problem. I don't know. I've seen folks be like, you should not expect me to come pay to celebrate you. If you want to have a birthday dinner, you need to be able to afford everyone that's going to show up. It's tab. You need to pay for it, etc., etc. I personally think that's nuts. Like, you want the birthday person to spend an exorbitant amount of money instead of splitting it amongst 10 people that are coming to the birthday dinner. It feels very undemocratic, very very capitalist, dare I say? I don't know. It all feels weird. Like, I don't know about that.
Oh, yeah. So, I'm a friendship educator, not an etiquette expert, but I will say this. I think a lot of it has to do, one, with expectations, right? And then two, with the language you use when you do the invitation, I think is important, right? So if you say, for example, like, I am hosting a dinner and I'd like you to come, like anytime I'm positioning myself as hostess, then the expectation is people are going to come as guests and I'm providing everything as the host. I think that's tricky, right? So maybe a loophole around that is to like have a friend do the inviting and say, hey, we're going to celebrate Danielle for her birthday on Friday. Now, maybe now there's an expectation that like, oh, I'm probably paying for my own dinner. I'm going to celebrate her, as opposed to I'm doing it directly and saying I'm hosting a dinner. So now I could see where there's room for a person to think like, oh, she's having a dinner and wants me to be an attendee. Because I've seen both. I've definitely been to a birthday dinner and, the birthday girl slipped away to go to the bathroom and came back and all the bills were paid for. And we were like, what? Are you kidding? No. And she was like, yeah, this is my gift to you. Like, I want you to come. I want you to be here. So I'm going to cover it. And I was like, oh, first of all, balling. First of all.
Baller. Okay.
Absolutely. I don't belong here. What's going on? Okay. And then I've definitely been to dinners where it was like, you're covering yourself, and maybe you bring a little gift, maybe you don't, maybe your presence is the gift, so it's really tricky, but I think that's where it's helpful to, know the expectations up front. So people aren't leaving thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe she did that. And now our whole friendship is sideways.
Now, Danielle, you say you're not an etiquette person, but that was very good advice. That was some very, very good advice on the etiquette front.
Yeah.
Right. It comes from personal experience. Been through some things. I feel that. I have some other friendship etiquette questions that I just want your thoughts on. Like, it doesn't have to be super official. Just, I want to know what you think about these circumstances. Okay. Should you unfriend your friend's ex as soon as they break up?
Personally, I feel like that's a yes. I feel like that's a yes. I feel like that's a yes, so that there's just like no misunderstanding. Now, I know this gets tricky when there's a whole like, well, were we already friends before? Were we all kind of mutual friend? Like, I know that gets kind of tricky, but I'll just say this. Women, we really value that alliance. Okay. So if you think there's any chance your friend might perceive things in a certain way, you either have a conversation, but alliances are very important. So whatever you feel like you need to do to
Yeah,
reassure your friend I'm on your side, do that.
very much that. I fully agree. 100% that. Okay, my next one is you always speak up for your friend when someone is bad mouthing them near you, or
Mm-hmm.
can you get away with like not saying anything if it's not too damaging?
That's interesting. I'm a fan of always saying something, but the way the something looks like, maybe it's not intense or aggressive, but it's a little something to let them know that that's my girl. So maybe they're saying, like, I don't know, she's a little, she's kind of aggressive or something. I don't know. I'm going to say, oh, that's so interesting. I've never experienced her that way. Nope, known her 10 years. I'm like,
I love
that's
that.
my sweet little flower. So
I
it's just my
love
nice way of
that.
being
Yeah.
like, no, we're not going to do that
Uh,
without being
Not too
combative.
much. Yeah, no, that is so good. Oh my goodness. What good advice. I'm going to take that one because I don't know that in between space. I'm like, "Excuse me. Please don't talk about my friend like that. I don't appreciate it. Thank you."
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. Everybody needs a ride or die, so that's perfect.
And that is definitely me. The last one is, should you ask your friend if she likes a photo that you're going to post of the two of you before you tag her in it or before you post it? Like, say you think that she looks a little, you're like, I've seen better photos of you, but I look so good in this one. And like, I really want to post it. Should you ask her?
I personally would. I personally would be like, "Hey, I was going to post this. Yes or no? Thumbs up, thumbs down." And if for any reason she's
Yeah.
like, "Do not do that to me," okay, then I'm just going to have to either crop her, give her a good crop, or it just doesn't go up. You
Yeah.
know?
Can I put an emoji over your face like when you're soft launching a man? What's the
Yeah, that's
what's the
fair.
options?
Totally fair.
Yeah. Common friendship misconceptions. I have a few listed here, and you please feel free to add your thoughts onto here. Friendship should be easy.
Mm, mm-hmm. Um, Friendships should offer a sense of ease to our lives. That's why they're totally elective relationships. Yes. But if by easy you think it means I shouldn't have to put in any kind of physical, mental, or emotional effort and this thing should thrive, I disagree with that. And I just want to share one little thing. There was a research study
Mhm.
where they asked people, do you believe that friendships should be easy, natural, and organic, or do you expect that they might take work? And they followed these people over the span of 5 years. The people who said that they expect that it should be easy were reporting greater feelings of loneliness than people who said, I expect it might take work. So, to some degree, I'm going to have to try to coordinate schedules with you to hang out. I'm going to have to remember your important days. I'm going to have hard conversations to make this worth it. But overall, doing that kind of work should build a healthy friendship that offers a sense of joy and ease to my life.
That is such a good, thoughtful answer. And it makes a lot of sense, which brings me to something I was going to bring up later on, but I think this is a good point. Is there a difference between trauma dumping and confiding in a friend about a negative experience that you're having? Because it feels like we're entering a time where folks don't think they should have to do any physical or emotional labor for their friends,
Mm,
and that startles me.
yeah. So the difference between trauma dumping and confiding, I this might not be popular, but let's do it. I kind of feel like when it comes to like being vulnerable, people like say, I'm just being vulnerable. Okay, I'm just telling my truth and I'm just like being vulnerable. And I respect that. I get it. But just a little reminder for everybody, vulnerability means you're taking a risk of rejection. You're taking a risk of rejection. So you're like, okay,
Mm.
this might not go well, but I'm going to muster the courage. I'm going to do it and put myself out there. The reason I bring that up is because if you are oversharing all your business when you first meet people, you're not thinking twice. You're talking about things like hygiene, sex, finances, divorce, addictions, trauma, and
Oh
you
my
do that
goodness.
often. Okay. You do that often. I really, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it. I really encourage you to think if that's truly being vulnerable or if you enjoy talking about it. Because if it does not
Mm.
feel like a risk to talk about mental health things, it is not vulnerability. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You have people who are mental health advocates, so this is what they do. That's great. But if you enjoy talking about your divorce and risque things or big, heavy things, it's the first thing you do without thought, consideration, or discernment. You're not being vulnerable. I think the difference between trauma dumping and confiding is there's some aspect of thoughtfulness and consciousness in confiding. I'm choosing carefully who I want to do this with. I'm kind of gauging if this is appropriate. I'm gauging how much I'm being thoughtful, as opposed to trauma dumping, where I have no regard for whether you feel comfortable or not. I'm going to get this all out and I'm going to share all my stuff. And no thought to if it's too much for you, no thought to this is a good time, no thought to the pacing of our friendship. I don't even know you like that yet. And so I feel like that might be a little bit of a difference.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what my thought would be on it as well. I think I'm starting to see folks conflate those two things
Totally.
though. I my friends will come to me and they'll be having a bad day and they'll be telling me about their bad day, and then they consistently will be like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry for trauma dumping on you." I'm like, "You guys.
Yeah.
You are my literal best friends on this planet. I love you to pieces. I want to know when you're having a bad day. You should feel more than free to give me a call and tell me about your bad day or whatever hard time you're going through. And I don't want to hear an apology for quote unquote trauma dumping. We are friends. This is a two-way street. When I am having a bad day, the likelihood I pick up my phone and call you is also high. So it's not like I'm sitting here just receiving a bunch of negative, negative, negative. There's no positive in our relationship. This is just friendship to me, you know. You can call me.
Totally. I love that. And your friends are lucky to have somebody like you who listens and is like, makes a safe environment to like, girl, please. And so I think for the receiver, the person on the other end of that, I think two things make it okay to dump or vent or whatever. One is we've established a space of safety, whether that means like you can tell me anything and I won't judge you, or you can simply vent and I'm not going to be annoyed or burdened by you. So we've established it's safe to do that here. And I think also our history, you know what I'm saying? And mutuality. If I'm doing it too, then we've kind of signed this nonverbal agreement that that's what we do here and that's okay. And the last thing I'll say too that I think is really important is being with friends who you know are direct and not people pleasers. Because if I am with a friend who I know will tell me, okay, Danielle, I need a minute. Tell me later. I feel safer with her. I feel safer with her than the friend who's going to be like, no, you're good. But secretly, she's bothered.
God.
So I need direct friends who will say, girl, get it all out. I'll let you know if it's too much. And I trust that she will.
I have said this so many times. A couple of my friends, they know that they're people pleasers. And because I'm aware of it and they are aware of it, I will often preface when I'm about to ask them for something or if I'm about to tell them something, I'm like, hey, if you cannot do this for any reason, even if that reason is I would rather watch television, I would rather literally do nothing, please just tell me no before you say yes and you didn't want to say yes. And I wish I didn't have to preface it that way, but I feel like it's the only way I'm sure to get an honest enough answer out of folks. So that was a really good point that I'm happy you brought up, because I'm like, I don't know if I'm being dramatic. I don't know if I'm the problem. Again, I never know. I'm like, maybe I'm the problem. Like, maybe you just aren't people pleasing enough. Maybe you should start saying yes all the damn time when you don't want to. Maybe you're the problem.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break. Other friendship misconceptions. Everyone should have a friend group.
Hmm. I love the idea of a friend group. I get it. I get it, right? You have this whole group of people. If one person's not available, you've got people to choose from. You guys have this history, these inside jokes. The practicality of that, especially as you get older, is very small. Um, and there are some people who are thriving in friend groups. I think that's terrific. But the older you get, the more priorities and obligations you adopt. You have tons of competing interests and things competing for your time. Now, when we're trying to get together, maintain relationships between five people, we've got to coordinate between all these people's schedules, their location, their kids, their job. So it becomes sometimes difficult for logistics, right? Then naturally, especially with women, women are very dyadic, meaning a lot of our relationships are one to one. So a lot of us know, even in these friend groups, you still have people who splinter off. And this is kind of my bestie in the friend group. Like that friend when we all
Yeah.
say we're going to go to dinner on Saturday in the group text, I'm texting her outside of the group text and being like, are you going? Because if you're not
Yeah.
going, I'm not
I'm
going.
not going. Yeah.
Okay. So what are we going to tell the group? Right. Okay. So the practicality of it, I think, is tricky. And then one take on it that I heard on TikTok that I thought was very interesting. One young lady said that she thinks it's actually a hindrance sometimes to be in a group because you default to the group, you have these people to talk to, you have somebody else kind of making plans of when we're hanging out, you just say yes. And she was saying that when you have the one-to-one friendships, it's kind of on you to maintain it, to take initiative, to remember to call, as opposed to
Mm.
this group that kind of just flows and exists, right? So I just thought that was
Hmm.
interesting. So I'll just say for the person who's thinking, I'm behind because I don't have a friend group, the research finds that 52% of people congregate with two people, pairs. And then I think it goes down to like 18% in trios, 9% in, groups of four, so on and so forth. So you're actually not
Yeah.
behind, you're in good company.
Okay. That makes me feel a lot better. I've always been one of those people that's like, I just want, where's my friend group?
Sure.
What about the folks who don't have a best friend, but they do have lots of, more tangential friendship relationships? Is that a misconception that everyone should have a best friend?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that everyone should have a best friend. I think there's a recent survey, maybe 2 or 3 years old, but it found that 40% of adults do not have a best friend. I think it feels especially difficult for women, though, because again, the concept of a bestie we're getting from when we're young. So even when you're two, your friends, your family is like, oh, is that your best friend? So
Best
you know what I'm
friend?
saying? So we're
Yeah.
very like relationships are central to our identity. I think it's called like self in relation theory, that for women, a part of our self development is relationships more so than men. And so having a bestie might feel like I need this to feel good about myself. I need a person. But I would
Mm-hmm.
argue if you're in that space and you don't have the bestie, to think about what you can get from the collective. So a lot of people have the blessing of having all of this from one person, and that's beautiful. But,
Yeah.
what you really need is to be intellectually challenged, emotionally supported. You need companionship. Are you getting that from the collective, the community you've built for yourself, which could be, at least you're getting all your needs met. It's just not maybe from the singular, it's from the collective. And the last thing I'll say is research finds that people who have relational diversity are happier. So the people who have a mom friend and a church friend and a concert tour music festival friend that person might be happier than the person who only has the bestie. So just something to think about.
That totally makes sense. A few years ago, my therapist was telling me she thinks a lot of my anxieties come from the fact that I expect all of my friends to be my everything friends. And she was like, Sequoia, as you get older, that is less and less realistic with time. Your friends can't be your everything friends. You can have your best friend who you talk about deep things with, and you can have your friend who you go out and party with, and you can have your friend who you hang out with on Sunday mornings at yoga class. But each of those friends is not going to be the other friend and be able to do 100% of things. So I understand the draw for that to be the case. It feels like that's kind of cultural as well, the draw
Mhm.
of like, this is my bestie. Like you said, when we're 2 years old, it's like, this is my best friend. If you see me, you see her. You know that we're doing everything together. And as we get older, it's like, that's not realistic. And it's hard to reconcile that sometimes with what pop culture tells us about what a best friend is and what a best friend should be.
Totally.
Also, over the course of my life, many of my best friends have been men. Danielle, I know, or boys. I know that you specifically work with women's friendship. I also have always had women best friends, but many of them have also been men. And I always hear this notion. I'm just curious your thoughts on this because I know that this is not necessarily your area of expertise, but I know that you have a lot more than I do about it. Do you think that men and women can be just friends? Because the internet swears that they can't.
So this is normally a question I stay away from. I'm just like, oh, I don't know what the research says on that. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this, who am I to come in and say, that relationship is not pure. Somebody has, who am
Mm-hmm.
I to say that what these two people have is not pure, that there's ulterior motives? That's not my place to say. I know plenty of women who are like, no, you don't understand. That's my brother. He truly is. But I do know that women share that universal experience of like, you have the guy friends, and then one day you feel like him, like at the corner of your eye, like looking at you longingly, and you're like, oh God, oh God. I know a lot of us have that too, and so I think it comes down to this: is friendship is a peer-to-peer relationship. We are equals. We're on the same page. We share the same objective for this relationship. So in any friendship, if one person has a different objective for the relationship, there's going to be issues. So whether it's a guy or a girl, if you expect something different from this relationship than I do, we're going to have issues. So if everybody's being honest and saying, hey, I'm in this friendship for this, then I'm going to trust your honest expression of being in this friendship for friendship. If one person's like, I'm secretly hoping this friendship is something else, that's going to be fundamentally an issue.
Don't do that. Don't secretly hope for nothing. Don't do that. Don't appreciate that at all.
Yeah.
Also, I want to specify. I mean, cishet men and women.
Sure.
Obviously,
Mhm.
not. I've had many of other friends as well, but I'm specifically talking about the cishet male to
Now,
female
I have a
relationship.
question for you.
I love this.
What are the differences that you've noticed of having male besties and women besties? Like, how do they either complement each other or offer something supplemental? Like, what's the difference in your experience?
This is such a good question. I think, unfortunately, and this might be societal or it might just be a me thing, I think I have lower expectations of my male friends than I do of my female friends. And I recognize that that is an issue and not fair, but that is the feeling that I have. I don't even expect men to be as good of friends as women because that has been my experience with male best friends. So there's that.
That is so interesting. I think many women would probably say this, highlight the same difference as you, like,
Yeah.
because again, maybe I expect that as another woman, you ought to know what to do. You ought to know what to say to support me. You ought to show up. You're a woman. You've been socialized to do
Yeah.
these things. You should know.
Yeah. Friendship breakups. My experience with friendship breakups has been limited but intense. I had one rather severe friendship breakup that happened via ghosting between the summer graduating high school and going to college. We hung out one day, and then the next day, he just did not me for months. I laid in bed and I cried and cried and cried because this was a person that I spent every day together up until then, hours on the phone with up until then. And I cried and cried and cried, and it was such a hard time. And I thought it was an isolated experience because this was before the prevalence of the internet. The internet was obviously around, but it was not as prevalent as it is now. And as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh my God, so many people experience this. Why is it not something that's more culturally relevant? Why are we so hung up on relationship breakups? When my friendship breakup, when I think about heartbreak, that's the one I think about. I don't think about ex boyfriends. I don't think about anything. I think about that man ghosting me out of nowhere and me being physically ill for like a month straight.
That is so interesting. I think there's a couple things at play there that account for the pain and tenderness of platonic breakups. I think the first is when you are entering into a romantic relationship, I know that there's a possibility this won't work out because I only get traditionally one. So
Yep.
this is either it or it ain't. When I'm falling into friendship with somebody, I'm often not thinking of the end at the beginning. So when it does happen, now I'm trying to scramble to kind of like reconcile my expectations with reality, which is like really, really hard. So there's that. Then we don't have the same space to even grieve it. You know, like if you're telling somebody like I'm going through a breakup, they're like, oh my gosh, like I get it, take your time. But with friends, it's like even the way I hear sometimes counsel each other through it, we're like, she was fake anyway. That was a fake friend anyway. We don't even need that. You can get new friends who are like minded. Like friendship is so disposable, whatever. Let's get new friends anyway. And I think those are noble attempts to help us like get over it. So sometimes people feel like they have to be alone and privately nurse their friendship breakups because there's still a little bit of shame and embarrassment over being so deeply affected by somebody who's not even your boyfriend's. Like it's not us, you know what I mean? So some of that is hard too. And then again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I was recently learning about something called the self in relation theory, and the idea that for women, relationships are central to our self concept and self development. Whereas men get a lot of messages around, you know, to show your independence, you have to break off from your family. You have to be self reliant. But for us, it's always been from when we were little, relationships helped me develop who I am. And I heard somebody once say, and I wish I remember so I can give her credit, but that, you know, in these romantic relationships, specifically with men, she was saying that sometimes cishet men, they see you as an object, but other women, and I know you said this was maybe a friendship breakup with a male, but with other women especially, they see you as a whole person. And so if my friend who opted to be with me and sees me as a whole person now wants to leave me, now I'm questioning if I'm interesting and funny and lovable and worthy. Whereas with a guy who I broke up with, I can at least kind of dismiss it as like, I mean, plenty of fish in the sea. He's not my guy. And so I think that, I mean, all those things I think make it really painful.
Jeez, yeah, that just unpacked a lot for me. I spent
Mm-hmm.
years unpacking this. This was more than 10 years ago now, of course, but just that little snippet unpacked so much for me there. It really was because this felt like a soulmate of mine.
Mm-hmm.
This is a gay man, y'all, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
just FYI. This felt like a soulmate. And so it was just, it felt like something was wrong with me when he promptly exited my life. And then, as you mentioned, there was the shame aspect of it. I was entering my first real relationship around the same time, and my boyfriend at the time could not grasp why I
Mm,
was grieving so severely over this boy. And my mom could not grasp why I could not leave my bed over this boy. And I kept getting the same messages over and over. Sequoia, he's just your friend. Like, it's not that big of a deal. You have other friends. You will make other friends. It's not that big of a deal. Meanwhile, my world was shattering
yeah.
around me. All I wanted him to do was pick up the phone so I could try to figure out what I did wrong or try to reconcile the situation. And it was just so much more shameful than it needed to be. I wish I had the internet around the time so I could see that other folks also go through this. It's not it doesn't have to be such a shameful experience. I'm glad that you exist so that folks know that this is a common experience and it doesn't have to be so shameful. So thank you for your work, Danielle.
I appreciate you.
Of course. And then we just have some listener questions if you're okay with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. Okay. Is it okay not to invite a friend to your birthday dinner because they don't believe in splitting the bill evenly? You're assuming said friend does have the money to split the bill.
Oh God. Um, so this is tricky because with close friends, like we've had some time to check out their behavior and to know patterns. So if this person's hypersensitive to it, I'm gonna assume it has been a recurring issue. I always say like if you're okay with what the potential social consequences might be afterwards. So is there a chance this person's gonna be like, I cannot believe I'm your friend and you didn't invite me to a major milestone? If you're okay with that, then go ahead. I always like the idea of front loading it with all of the data so you can choose what you want to do. So saying like, hey, so we're having a birthday dinner. This is how it's going down with payment. Here's where we're going. I might like throw in other things so it doesn't just feel like a payment issue. This is where we're going. Here's the date and time. Here's who's going to be there. And then here's how we're going to like kind of divvy things up. Does that feel good to you? Does that feel good? Does
Wow.
that feel good to you? I need like a
That's
verbal
so
yes.
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
That might be a way to at least set the expectation, so, but again, because either way there's going to be consequences, but um, maybe at least that way we can hold accountable because we had this conversation. You said you're good. So everybody should be good.
That is such good advice. I need you to have an advice show overall. Just have people write in and figure out their whole friendship stuff because this advice is so sound. Because it's like, oh, that's a conundrum. What do? You just communicate. You tell them exactly what's going on. Have we ever thought about that? No. So, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, you have a friend who you don't hear from anymore once they get a boyfriend. Is it okay to cut her off after attempting to bring it to her attention?
Oh my gosh. So here's the thing. It's unpopular, maybe, but when people get into romantic relationships, they are going to drift away a little bit. They are. People don't like to hear that, but like, yes, yes, they're excited. They're consumed by this new relationship. There's research that finds that our brains only have the cognitive capacity to maintain five ultra close relationships. And when we get into a romantic relationship, he or she takes up two of those five spaces. So to some degree, I
What?
have to expect I'm going to see her less. I have to share with her. Now, if at the heart of your issue is she's canceling plans last minute, she's only talking about her boyfriend and no longer asking you about your life, now I get that because it doesn't feel reciprocal. She doesn't feel invested in my life. I totally get it. I say all that to say, if this is a friendship you value and things are new now because she got a new boyfriend, to tell her the vulnerable piece of what you really want to say. You're angry and disappointed, so you're considering cutting off. But at the heart of it, you miss your friend and you feel like an afterthought. But that feels more vulnerable
Yeah.
to say. So now I'm going to reach out to you and say, instead of like, oh, you got a man now, so you don't know anybody. What I really want to say is, girl, I know you're booed up. I love that for you. But can we at least, keep our Friday morning FaceTimes? Hey, I miss you. Can we at least do our first of the month trivia nights? Because I know you're booed up, but can we at least do that? That's me telling you I miss you. That's me giving you something tangible I'd still like to do. And now if it's no, I don't want to do that, or that I have to wait to see what his schedule is first, now we can have that conversation. But I think like let me cut you off feels extreme to me. It feels extreme.
That makes a lot of sense. Great. Okay, these are things I have some growth to do. That's it. I just have some growth to do. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Are black friendships or friendship dynamic different from other groups?
Okay. I don't know about like black people friendships versus Asian friendships, but I will say this about interracial friendships. Okay. I
Mm.
have had many a black person, and me being one of them, who has said, you know what, it feels really hard sometimes to be friends with white people or non black people, period.
Wow.
Because what we said earlier, friendships are supposed to offer some sense of ease, okay? Ease and understanding. If when I get into this friendship, I find myself explaining, justifying, not feeling totally at rest because I don't know if you're going to say something crazy, if I find that the relationship's making me do those things, I might find, man, it feels like a lot of mental or emotional labor. Or if when we're in our private container, our secret vault, we're fine. But when we get around her friends or family, I see another side and now I don't feel totally safe. So I have heard people express to me, I don't find affirmation, understanding, and rest in friendships with people who don't get it, whatever that it is. And so they feel quicker to trust other black new potential friends because we already assume you understand and share a certain experience, you get it. Now we know that blackness doesn't equal you totally understand because we're not a monolith and we have different, she might have a different faith, a different background, whatever.
Yeah.
But yes, I've heard people say that they experience friendship differently with different groups of people as black people. And mostly again, because of like anti-blackness is like so strong that even if you're Hispanic, Asian, whatever, you can be anti-Black. So if I'm in friendship with you and you say some stuff that lets me know I am not safe here, and it's not a compliment for you to be like, okay, well, I'm friends with you, but the rest of y'all, it's not going to work, you know?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I had this white friend when I was much younger who asked me if she could borrow some of my quote unquote ghetto clothes for her Halloween costume where she was dressing as a rapper. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
I couldn't believe that shit. I think I just stopped talking to her. I was like, "What?
Totally.
Can you borrow whom from what? My ghetto clothes for your Lil Wayne costume? Are you out of your rabid ass?" That was wild to me. So I understand, because I was hesitant for a long time after that to have white friends. I was like, no, because I thought we was on one accord. I thought we was on the same page. And she asked me, what?
Yeah.
I've since had fantastic non-Black friends, but
yeah,
I totally understand how we could arrive there.
That is objectively wild. Yeah.
Yeah, very well. Danielle, is there anything else you want to tell folks about before we log off?
No, just I'm so grateful to you for facilitating a moment to have this conversation. It's so important. And, I just want to like break up the thought that like friendship is something that should be privately experienced. And if you're having struggles, you should privately. No, we can have these conversations around the nuance, the complexities of being friends with one another. It's such an elective relationship with so much ambiguity. What are we doing here? What's a violation? What's not? So I think the more we can have open, honest conversations around platonic relationships, I think the better. And so I'm just grateful to be here and happy for this conversation. And I hope that if the content did resonate with listeners, that they'll consider buying a copy of Fighting for Our Friendships to learn tangible ways to create more depth in their platonic relationships.
Get your copy, y'all. Don't sleep. Do it now. Go down to the show notes, click the link, and pre-order your copy. And if you are listening past the 7th, order it outright. Danielle, please let the folks know where they can find you across social media.
Yeah, so everything lives at betterfemalefriendships.com, and my podcast is the Friend Forward podcast, and people have been so gracious and supportive, and this whole journey has been such a blessing. So I'm just so happy to have people trust me with what is a very tender and personal issue, because friendships are so important. So I'm here to help people through it.
It has been so fantastic to watch your ascent on social media from afar. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. This is exactly what I feel like I need. I'm sure a lot of girls feel the exact same way. So I appreciate your presence. I appreciate your work. Listen to the podcast, buy the book, y'all. And that's it. Thank you for joining, Danielle.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all for our show today. For those of you who want to check us out on YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/@BlackPeopleLoveParamore. The link will be in the show notes. If you have comments or suggestions, you can hit me at blackpeopleloveparamore@gmail.com or across all social media platforms at BPLP Pod. You can support this show and other wonderful Max Fun shows at MaximumFun.org/join. Our editor is Jenriel Lagat. Our producer is Palmira Muniz. And I am your host, Sequoia Holmes. This has been a production of Maximum Fun.